We tell the story of religion wrong, at least in America. I was listening to the musical Hadestown, and if you don't know Hadestown, it's a ecological and existential critique of unfettered capitalism, hidden behind the guise of a romantic tragedy, and it uses the stories of the ancient Greek Orpheus and Eurydice, and it revitalizes the story in a beautiful and fantastic way. And we see this in other stories too. We see this with Percy Jackson, or Disney's Hercules, or Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and even Christopher Nolan is working on an Odyssey movie in the next few years. So there's obviously something with these classical stories that make them stick around. They speak to us and tell us more about our existence and humanity than just giving us entertainment for a little bit. But so many modern religions, especially ones that stretch back hundreds or thousands of years, like Judaism or Christianity or Hinduism or Islam or Native American spirituality and so on, uh, they have these rich repositories of these stories that have stuck around through the years. But these myths, and not myths in the sense that they're untrue, but myths in the sense that they reveal something about humanity or existence or something like that, they're still able to tell a captivating and powerful story, whether you're part of that religion or not. And the problem is that when we retell these stories, a lot of the time we either tame it into something boring or try to attach a blunt and obvious message to it, or we just completely ignore entire swaths of stories that are captivating and fascinating. For example, to my American audience, can you tell me just one Hindu myth or story? And I'm not just talking about media retellings. I think this problem exists in religious institutions too, where they demote their own stories, their own myths, to something boring or something moralized. They no longer appreciate the rich story that their own tradition tells. And I think this is largely due to people being scared to mess with sacred stories as if they exist in an ancient bubble and shouldn't be changed, as if moralizing them or taming them or interpreting them doesn't change them in some way. But rather, the mark of great literature, the mark of great storytelling, is that old stories can be told and retold again and again for different audiences and different time periods and still express certain truths for their audience. As someone with an MA in religious studies in the Hebrew Bible, there's a time and place to talk about the historical critical context or the social political context or the literary context of these stories. And that can be interesting to some people like me. And it's important work, but there's also a time and place to appreciate the beauty of these stories from all those religions, not just your own, without them being watered down and moralized. And that's for everyone. To force these stories to stay static is a tragedy. This is why we get new versions of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Romeo and Juliet, or The Grinch. Literature and stories and myth get readapted for their time. And we can even see these in ancient religious stories. Look at Habakkuk in the Hebrew Bible, for example. Our oldest attestations depict the Chaldeans or the Babylonians to be the enemy. But by the Dead Sea Scrolls in Pesher Habakkuk, we get the Katim or the Romans to be depicted as the enemies, thus adapting it for their times. And in Judaism, look at Purim. Every year during Purim, the story of Esther is retold and reperformed in dramatic fashion and often uses a backdrop of modern events. For example, last year, I know a Barbie themed Purim celebration was not uncommon. These stories from Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or Islam, African religions, ancient Greece, wherever, stick around through the centuries and millennia because they're wonderful stories that remain relevant. When they lose their strength or their power or their ability to be reinterpreted, they die out. But I think the stories from all these religions, old and new, remain powerful and entertaining and useful, and we should treat them with the respect they deserve and retell them as the mythical, exciting tales that they are.